with Victoria Derbyshire.
Hello, I'm Balvinder Gill. I was Sub-Postmaster until I was wrongly suspended by the Post Office and made bankrupt. What does the promise to clear and compensate victims of the Post Office scandal mean for me?
Balvinder is here along with 4 other sub-postmasters. They'll give their reaction live tonight to today's news that they will finally be cleared. But will everyone be helped? The minister responsible tells us the budget for compensation is £1 billion. Is he sorry it's taken so long?
Oh, it's terrible. I apologise to all those people. It's, I think, over 60 people. You know, this has been going on for over 20 years, probably 24, 25 years now.
Who does he think should pay the bill? Taxpayers or Fujitsu, who delivered the faulty Horizon software? Plus tonight, the man who was employed by the Post Office to investigate Horizon and who found it faulty as far back as 2013. Good evening. It feels like theft, but it was more like systematic abuse. The words of this postmaster describing how he says he was treated by the Post Office. Systematic abuse. Just let those words sink in. By the government-owned, the taxpayer-owned Post Office. It pursued postmasters, wrongly accusing 736 of them of theft, false accounting and fraud. Tonight we'll hear Balvinder's story in full. He was sectioned 3 times in the years that followed, and like so many others, his story is unbelievable. But it happened. And we'll get the reaction from all these former Post Office branch managers to what the government announced today, which was that it would clear and compensate victims of the Post Office scandal in England and Wales. What about those, though, who don't have a conviction to overturn, whose lives were still trashed? Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being with us on Newsnight and talking to our audience. Please do introduce yourselves.
My name's Shazia Sadiq. I was a postmaster from 2009 to 2016. I was hounded and bullied out of my post offices. I was so proud to serve the people of the Newcastle West End.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi Victoria, my name's Chirag Sidpura. I was a postmaster from 2013 to 2017, where there was an unannounced audit of from the Post Office who found a shortfall of just over £57,500. I repaid the money back within 48 hours, hence the reason why I wasn't pursued for criminal convictions.
Hi, Bal.
Hi Victoria. I had 2 post offices in 2003 to 2004. I just got married. I was 23 years old. I had my whole future planned out for me, and I was suddenly terminated and pursued for a debt of £108,000, which has haunted me for the following 2 decades, and still to this day is not clear.
Hi, Teju.
Hello, Victoria. My name is Teju Adidayo. I ran a post office in Kent from 1999 to 2005. And when the auditors came and accused me of stealing £52,000, which was a shortfall, the data, all the documents they brought me is the Horizon data. I did not do any kind of auditing with them, to be honest. They've removed everything from my shop and from the branch, and from there, I started the battle with the Post Office. They convicted me of stealing and then later false accounting because I paid back the money. And it's 2 years suspended sentence and 200 hours community service.
Hi, Julie.
Hello, Victoria. My name's Julie Beisner. I ran my post office from 1996 to 2021, but my family history with the post office goes back much further. In fact, to 1847, when my great-great-grandfather, Stephen Howkins, was the first postmaster. What I'd like to talk about is my final audit, which was in 2021. Because Post Office say that the system is robust, that the current Horizon system is vastly different from the generic one. And I found that nothing had changed in 2021. The auditors came in, my manager said, "Excuse me a moment," and she stepped outside and left me alone in the office with the two auditors. This was after the office had been closed during the pandemic. They found a shortfall of £1,970, which they said if I didn't settle the accounts, I would not be able to retire. It was only when I joined the inquiry that the Post Office sent a written confirmation they were not going to pursue me for that money. My reason for being on this programme today is well, to explain about Horizon, that it is still going on, that certainly when I had my office post the 2016, still had issues with the PIN pad, the screen freezing, power outages, ineffectual helpline. So in my mind, nothing has changed.
Okay, thank you. Welcome all of you. Thank you so much for being here and giving it your time. I want to ask all of you how today's news, which the government describes as unprecedented, I mean, it is MPs introducing a law which will overturn convictions that have been handed down by the courts, how it's going to affect you. Val?
Personally, there's certain things that were still missing. On a very personal note, I didn't see anything about bankruptcy. There hasn't really been any update about people who potentially, if they were to get any redress for money which was taken from them or restoring their life back to what it was, there's people out there who are actually still locked in a situation where that money would go back to the insolvency service and wouldn't be able to get released to them. And the government were doing some work on it, and credit to the announcements and everything that's now speeded up, and Kevin Hollinrake and certainly the announcement in Parliament today. You can see people are working very hard to get these things done very fast, and we are patient to a degree, but we just want to see that these obstacles again are not put in our way, that this process needs to flow now, because there's literally, I think, the public pressure. Don't make it just into an election bargaining tool. Give us the real justice and give us the real redress. Like, we're not asking for life-changing money. There's a parallel universe where we lived normal lives. Put us back on that track. That's what I would ask.
You're nodding in agreement with that, Shazia?
100%. I couldn't.
How were you affected by today, if at all?
I'm part of the 555, so it is welcome news, but I do welcome it with a bit of caution.
Well, just let me explain to our audience. Part of the 555, that's the 555 former sub-postmasters who took this group legal action against the Post Office in 2018, and many convictions were overturned, but a lot of the 555 didn't have convictions at all, actually, did they?
That's correct.
Which you're one of those,
Yeah.
and it means, for example, you have been offered today an upfront sum of £75,000.
That's correct.
Is that enough?
It doesn't even touch the surface. Doesn't even
Really?
touch the sides. Absolutely not.
And why do you say that? Because it is a lot of money.
It is, absolutely, totally agree, and I welcome it. It is a start, but it nowhere it touches the sides of what I've lost. There's also the consequential losses of this. I lost my pension, for example, my health care, all of these things as a consequence of the action. But like Bal says, put us back in the position we would have been had we not have been affected.
And is it possible for you to estimate a sum, come up with a figure of how much it has cost you over the years?
Victoria, I think I would have to sit with somebody very much more intelligent than myself to work that figure out, but it's definitely not £75,000.
So it sounds like you're not going to take that. You are going to go through the longer assessment process, even though it's going to delay any figure.
I mean, I haven't made any decision yet. I'm just absorbing sort of what happened today, Victoria. But it is promising, but we have been down this road before. We need implementation now. And back up what they're telling us, if they really are listening.
Now, you're all nodding at that. We need implementation, because you've been given false hope before, and it was described to me as, you know, it's like one step forward but two steps back. How confident are you that it's actually going to happen now?
Well, they need to make it happen, especially with the drama that was aired on New Year's Day, and that's what's really brought the 555 have actually really brought this together. They're going to make it happen for everybody else as well. So we need to we all need to collectively make sure that we push, especially with the surrounding public, to push to get the government to sort out what they've done wrong.
Why do you say what the government have done wrong? Because the post office is owned by the government.
The post office is the sole shareholder of the post office.
The government is the sole shareholder. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Ultimately,
yeah.
Ultimately, the buck stops with them.
Okay, Teju, how does today's news affect you?
I have mixed feelings as well, because there are so many problems with the 555. I was part of the 555 as
You
well.
had your conviction overturned in 2021.
In 2021, there's still a lot of problems there, where they are trying to stigmatize victims. I was one of the 3 that they called the public interest. And up till now, I don't even understand what that means. I'm waiting for them to explain it properly, because if it's anything to do with how much they would have spent retrying my case, they've been spending money since 2018 when they went to court. So how much more would it have cost them to retry my case and get me to the right place?
Julie, you talked about an audit in your post office in 2021.
Yes.
So 2 years ago.
Yes.
And they found a shortfall.
Yes.
Even though we know the post office says Horizon is much more robust, but hey, they've said that before. How has this affected your life?
How has this, what you mean, the whole post office scandal?
Yeah.
Well, it's obviously reputational damage. For example, village fetes and things, if you go to anything, they all want to know what happened with the post office. Sometimes you're advised not to go to things because people are going to talk about the post office. It was a very harrowing experience, that final audit, and having that hanging over me. Because, as I said, I was brought up with post office. I knew how to run a post office. I knew all these people. And I mean, one thing that perhaps your viewers are not aware of is that when I became Sub-Postmaster in 1996, Post Office were actively encouraging postmasters to apply to become magistrates. You know, the irony of that.
Yes. Bal, you were sectioned 3 times in the years that followed the Post Office pursuing you. I wonder if you can give our audience a little insight into what that was like.
Yes, of course. So, initially, the trauma of what happened that day, that would always live with me. Like, you can forgive, but you can't forget what happened. And they turned my life upside down. And that, after that day, I became very numb and slowly deteriorated into a shadow of myself. I felt very numb, very low. There were times when I had suicidal thoughts. I had an impulse to do something maybe, and then I'd have to have the second thought to counter that and manage to get through. But I hid so much, and there were so many cracks in my relationship with my wife and in my family relationships. I couldn't attend weddings or occasions, and you know, it really affected me. Over time, I was harbouring this depression, and it developed into then episodes of mania, and I had some disastrous 3 episodes of mania, each time being sectioned. I mean, I spent my 40th birthday in a mental hospital. I remember being asked just to speak to the doctors there, and I said very specifically that a government-run organisation, the Post Office, had been pursuing me for many years, and it was recorded as delusions of grandeur.
Oh my God.
So, you know, it was like trying to
Actually, it was reality.
Yeah.
It was the truth.
I mean, there was a 10-year period up until the JFSA came into my domain of understanding that it was there.
That's the Justice for Sub-Postmasters.
Yeah, Alan Bates is the organisation that he set up. And I looked back at my emails recently. It was 2013 when I first reached out to him, and I read the email to myself, and really it was a time of despair and like looking for answers somewhere. And then when obviously watching the programme and seeing also actually how people came together. And I remember those days, and it's really, it's difficult to, I live in a cautious way. Like, my life is very restricted now. I have to be careful how much I take on, because I don't want to, I have that fear of going into another episode. So you have to restructure your whole life, and you can't get that time back.
How are you compensated for being sectioned 3 times? I mean, what is that sum of money? It's.
You know, Victoria, the thing is, there's people out there who've suffered worse. I mean, there's a very painful thing to think, and I like to think we are survivors, not victims. We're survivors, because there's some of us that didn't survive this.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a very painful thing to think about. And the fact that we're here today, we need to make sure we're doing our best to tell our truth, that people understand and never forget these people. Yes. You know, these people, they were genuine people who were serving their community, just how we set out to be. So.
On the subject of serving your communities, which you have all done in different parts of the country, Shazia, when things started to go wrong for you, and you ran 3 successful post office franchises, and you saw initially £2,000 disappear on your computer system while you're on the phone to the operator asking for help. But how, as it went on, how did your community treat you? Because they thought you were a thief.
Regrettably, the way the post office treat us by locking us out of our post offices, removing our keys from us and closing the place down very publicly, it had a negative effect, because there was pockets of our community that decided I was a thief, and therefore I needed, you know, to be assaulted with my children by my side, and eggs and flour were thrown at me, and I was assaulted in the street with my children there. So as a result of, so that again, it's consequences. How do you put a price on that? Your dignity, your reputation. I worked so hard as a single parent to build up businesses for my children's future, and for the post office to come in, and it angers me when people call them auditors, because they really were not. They balanced, just come in and balanced against what was on the screen. Yeah, Victoria, it was absolutely horrendous for myself and my children.
Yeah. We're going to talk more in a moment or two. We're going to hear from the Minister responsible, Kevin Hollinrake, who was standing up in the Commons today. Stay there. Thank you so much for being with us. More from you in a moment. Relax for a few minutes. Now, Rishi Sunak said today he will change the law to ensure that those who've been convicted will be exonerated. How exactly will that work?
Well, Victoria, this announcement today is all down largely to this group. That, we should see them in a minute, that is the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board. And as we can see today, they met, there he is, Kevin Hollinrake, the Postal Affairs Minister, who you're going to be talking to. And there you can see there, Lord Arbuthnot, James Arbuthnot, the former Conservative MP.
We'll talk to him before the end of the programme.
We'll talk to him. He is portrayed in the ITV drama. And over there is Kevin Jones, who is the Labour MP. Now, Lord Arbuthnot and Kevin Jones, they are the 2 parliamentarians who have campaigned on this really more than any other parliamentarians. And what we heard from the government today drew on a recommendation from this advisory board, which includes 2 legal academics in it. And the recommendation that the government's picked up basically has 4 core elements to it. So in the first place, as Rishi Sunak was saying, as we can see there, right the wrongs of the past, overturning convictions. So what we will be seeing, as you were saying, is legislation to overturn those post office Horizon related convictions. We are talking about 700 to 1,000 people. Now, in the second place, we will see a re-examination of some cases, because there were some postmasters who lost appeals against their convictions. So the government will be deciding in the next few days whether they should be included in this scheme. In the third place, compensation. Once your conviction is overturned, you are entitled to £600,000 of compensation, but you could negotiate for a higher amount. Finally, a statement of innocence. It is widely accepted that there will be some people who were rightly convicted who will have it overturned. They will be entitled to that £600,000 payment. So to guard against that, you will have to make a statement of innocence, and that could work against you if evidence turns out that you were guilty of it. In the final place, Scotland. So this legislation today applies in England and Wales, but Humza Yousaf, who is the Scottish First Minister, he's been talking today about exploring ways in which this scheme could apply in Scotland.
And what are Westminster campaigners saying this evening?
Well, they are happy, but they are taking nothing for granted because this has been one very, very long campaign. And one of the fears they have is what I was talking about, which is those people who could have been rightly convicted and receive that £600,000 payment, and they're already working out what the headlines in papers could look like if it turns out that somebody who did commit an offence gets more than £500,000. Could that tilt public opinion against them? But their view is it's right to take that risk. And of course, it was the recommendation of that cross-party advisory group to have that blanket overturning of those convictions.
Thank you very much, Nick. Well, Nick just mentioned Scotland. In Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin's Vice President Michelle O'Neill said she hopes those wrongly convicted there will be swiftly cleared. I spoke earlier to Kevin Hollinrake. He's the Minister responsible for postal affairs in the UK. I started by asking him how long it will be before people were exonerated and how long it would take for the compensation to reach people.
Weeks. That's what we're hoping. We can't say how many weeks because this legislation has to go through Parliament, and there's no real fixed timescale for that because Parliament decides. But we want to do this very quickly. So we think we can put a new law in place in weeks. And once people, this law will make sure that every single person who has been convicted as a result of Horizon evidence, as a result of this scandal, their convictions will be set aside, will be overturned, and that opens the door immediately to compensation. And people have two choices at that point in time. They can go down a full assessment route for compensation for loss and for damage to other things such as reputation and health and relationships and all those things. But also the alternative to that is they can take a very simple option, which is take a fixed sum award of £600,000, which is a much quicker process because people don't need to compile a full claim and assess the full claim. So it can happen much more quickly. So people could be getting compensation in weeks, a matter of weeks.
OK, so by weeks, to me, that's less than a month. Is that fair?
I can't say that because they say it's got to go through both houses. We're not totally in charge of the timescales.
Sure, but you could do this in a day. There is precedent here.
Yes, that's right. And I'm not saying we can do it in a day. But of course, before we do that, we have to actually draft the legislation. We've got to get the legislation in the right place. We've got to talk to a lot of people, the judiciary, of course, and the Minister of Justice. So there are some steps we need to go through. We want to make that as quick a process as possible.
You said today it will mean an honest postmaster, quote unquote, will have his or her conviction overturned. And they have to sign a statement, presumably, essentially saying, I didn't steal anything, I didn't thieve anything, I didn't, defraud the post office, I am honest. Like, why are you making them do that?
Well, the reality is some of those people that are exonerated through this may have been guilty of an offence. I mean, we don't want to labour that point, but we do want to be clear about that point. It's not. It's possible that some of those people are actually guilty of something. But nevertheless, so it could be that we declare effectively overturn convictions of guilty people. But I think that will be a minority at the worst case. And what this will do, of course, is give a route to compensation and to exoneration for hundreds of people. We think, in the context of things, it's absolutely the right thing to do, and certainly the people we're working with seem to feel that way too.
What about those people who were forced or advised to plead guilty? They're going to be exonerated too by this new law. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, they are.
OK. The 555 former postmasters, sub-postmasters who brought the group lawsuit suing the post office, mostly there were non-criminal cases. What will they get?
Well, they've already got the routes we've already set out. So the group litigation order you're talking about, the people who went to court, there's a compensation scheme for them, which they've already got access to. What we announced today was that people in that scheme can apply, instead of going through this full assessment route, which takes time, they can go down the other route, which is a fixed sum award of £75,000.
Is it just £75,000?
£75,000. It will suit everybody. You know, people, you think you've got a claim of more than that, then you'll probably want to go down the full assessment route. For some people, they'll think that's a quick and easy way to draw a line under this, and you get your compensation very quickly without having to submit a detailed claim.
Yeah. I mean, you say a quick and easy way to draw a line under it. I mean, it's not, is it? Because for some, it's been 20 odd years. So,
well, I apologise for the time it's taken, and there's lots of different reasons behind that. But we are where we find ourselves. It's a quick and easier process from here.
Some sub-postmasters had to file for bankruptcy because they literally couldn't afford to pay the post office money the post office said they owed them. What happens to people who had to file for bankruptcy?
The position is those people should be put back into the position they were before the detriment affected their lives, before the misconduct affected their lives. So, so if somebody's been made bankrupt because of the actions of the post office, those people should be restored back to their financial health, their position they were in prior to that happening.
I know you and one or two of your predecessors have been looking in detail at this issue for a period of time. It would be fair to say, though, wouldn't it, that it's the ITV drama which has really forced you to take this action swiftly now?
Force is completely the wrong word. It's accelerated what we've done, absolutely. But we were looking at many of these, because we're public servants. We respond to public pressure, of course we do. But nevertheless, we were looking at all these issues prior to that dramatisation being aired. For example, the fixed sum award of £600,000 is something we implemented last autumn. The discussions about overturning convictions en bloc, on a blanket overturning of convictions, is something I've been discussing with the advisory board for months. So it's not right to say we would not have done this. We've just done it at much greater pace, and I'm glad we've been able to do that. And it shows the power of that dramatisation and the human story of this, because it has accelerated some of the things we were planning to do.
How sorry are you about the length of time it's taken then? Because as you know, dozens of people have died waiting for justice.
Oh, it's terrible. I apologise to all those people. It's, I think, over 60 people. You know, this has been going on for over 20 years, probably 24, 25 years now. So, and due to the tenacity and the commitment and the inspirational people like Alan Bates and others, and Lee Castleton and Joe Hamilton, this has happened at all. So, absolutely, to those people, we should all apologise. The system has failed them, but we're putting things right. This government didn't create this mess, but this government is actually putting things right, and quite right too.
How much could the total compensation bill cost, do you think?
Well, the maximum budget currently specified is £1 billion. That's not a forecast, it is a budget. So it's very, very significant figures.
And will the taxpayer be paying that, or will Fujitsu be paying that?
Well, it may be a combination of both, and I very much hope it is a combination of both, or a combination of the taxpayer, and because obviously the taxpayer's responsibility here has been the owner of the sole shareholder of the post office, but others may do too. Now, we've got a statutory inquiry, which is led by a former High Court judge, Sir Win Williams. He's doing very fine work, and they're taking evidence and will lead to a conclusion hopefully later this year. At that point in time, we'll be able to identify exactly who's responsible. Fujitsu were the providers of the technology, the Horizon system in the first place. So if it can be shown that they're responsible and culpable, then I think it would be only right that anybody in that position shares some of the financial cost of this.
And in terms of accountability, I mean, you've just mentioned Fujitsu. At the post office, there are a number of chief executives and chairmen and women who have gone on to other jobs with bonuses and pensions intact. Can you say to the sub-postmasters tonight and to the general public watching tonight that if they need to be held accountable, they will be?
Yes, Absolutely. And by whatever means, I mean, we've got to act within the law, of course, but as well as the inquiry happening, clearly our enforcement agencies, our prosecution, people in charge of prosecutions in this country, I'm sure, taking a very keen interest in the evidence that's coming to light as a result of the inquiry. But those are matters they're clearly, the police, for example, are completely independent of governments. But nevertheless, would I personally like to see individuals held to account for what has happened to the people involved in this scandal? Absolutely, I would.
And one final question. Are you considering, as Sir Keir Starmer called for earlier this week, taking away the power of the Post Office to pursue its own prosecutions? Because as so many people have pointed out over so many years, it would appear to be a massive conflict of interest.
Yes, it's a short answer. I mean, the Post Office hasn't prosecuted anybody since 2015. Because of what's happened, I cannot see a situation where it would do that anyway. But the Post Office doesn't have a specific right of private prosecution. Any person in the land and any company in the land has that right. What the Justice Secretary has said and the Justice Select Committee has said, they're questioning whether that's the right thing, certainly based upon what's happened here. So there will be a body of work, and I'm sure the Justice Secretary have more to say on this, of whether that general right of private prosecution should still stand in our society. And that's some very significant questions to be answered in that area.
Mr. Hollenrake, thank you very much for talking to Newsnight and to Sub-Postmasters who are with us this evening. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Kevin Hollenrake. Let me introduce you to Ron Warmington, Managing Director of Second Sight. That's the company hired in by the Post Office to look at the Horizon computer system and investigate the Sub-Postmaster complaints. Welcome to you. Thank you for being with us. I'm just going to ask your fellow guests for some reaction to what Kevin Hollenrake had to say. Julie?
Well, I mean, we don't know. We don't know anything, do we? We just get announcements. I mean, how do we know all these things? How can we trust them, what they're saying and what they're actually going to do? And why has it taken so long? And why the discussions take so long? I also think people might be interested to know that the Post Office has recently given a contract of £36 million to Fujitsu to extend the Horizon system until spring 2025. Now, if you join the dots up, generic Horizon, what happened with that? Horizon Online, what happened with that? My experiences. And then Horizon, whatever they decide to call it, is still going to be in operation till 2025. And how do we know that it's not got the same flaws that the old systems had?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a major breach of trust here, isn't there? Toju, how do you react to what Mr. Hollenrake said?
I think they need to do a lot of thinking and meeting on this matter, because if they don't get rid of Horizon, it's a question of time before they have the same problems again. And all these promises that they are giving each and every one of us, especially when they keep dividing every single Sub-Postmaster within that group or this group or that group, they need to get it sorted out and come to the public with something more tangible that we cannot rely on, not just promises.
Do you have confidence that any senior executives from either Fujitsu or the Post Office, if they need to be brought to account, will be brought to account? What do you think?
I think with the public inquiry that's currently going on, and especially with the Metropolitan Police that are involved, because the Metropolitan Police have to gather evidence to take it to the CPS for charging advice, I think there is going to be individuals that are going to be held to account, definitely.
Do you have confidence?
Yeah, to a degree. I've been following the inquiry very closely, and my only concern is what they say is the corporate amnesia, but I think that without all the pressure, and certainly with Paula Venables now return to CB, I would hope that there'd be a more open, sort of with the public outcry, a more open approach to when they're asked questions under the inquiry. I have to say, I have to commend Mr. Hollenrake. I think he's been really pushing very, very hard. I think people sometimes do deserve credit. I mean, he's inherited that from, we know, through various governments, and I think he deserves some credit, and for yourself also for representing us so well. Thank you.
Not at all, that's our job. Mr. Warmington, you found the Horizon system as far back as 2013 was faulty, unreliable, dodgy. and that was an interim report. When you presented that to the Post Office, who had hired you to investigate Horizon, what did they do?
Well, by that point, we were starting to find, particularly my colleague Ian Henderson was starting to find pretty odd material in the papers that were being submitted. The agreement had been nothing would be held back. Second Sight was off the leash. We could look at whatever we liked, and nothing would be withheld. Even privileged or confidential documents were to be given to us, and that's what had happened. Of course, as soon as we started to find material that answered the key question that the ministers had asked, which is look out for anything that looks remotely like wrongful prosecution conduct, and we were finding that, then there were staff changes and cooperation reversed, frankly.
OK. So then you completed your report and presented that final report in 2015. What did the Post Office do then?
Well, of course, in between those two exercises, there was a second stage, which was the mediation scheme. We'd carried out deep investigations into 140 cases and written 140 reports. When we finalised our final report, we still had some of those individual cases, including some of the ones we've mentioned here, to review. So we had to produce our final report before we'd even finished the work. And then all hell broke loose.
What do you mean?
Well, we were fired.
You were fired?
Yes. Well, in fact, more than that. The entire mediation scheme was exploded.
Collapsed. Yeah.
Tony Hooper, Alan Bates was told that was to be discontinued and that Post Office would...
Why were you fired?
Well, I don't know. One would have to ask Post Office. It was coincidental that shortly before the plug was pulled on the mediation scheme, my colleague Ian and I had been trying to pick up from where we left off prior to the mediation scheme, which is to look deeply into matters like the suspense accounts and other allegations that have been made that seemed to be supported by the cases that we'd looked at, and in particular our desire to dig into the suspense accounts, into which we suspected some of the funds that ought to have been repaid to the postmasters had found its way, and from there, of course, it found its way eventually into the profit and loss account of the Post Office.
So, I mean, I'm glad you've answered that, because that was my next question. It came up, obviously, in the drama. Joe Hamilton asked it in reality, and they reflected it in the drama. Like, all these people, some of them, you paid thousands back. You know, what did you pay back in 48 hours? 57 grand or something?
57,500.
You borrowed from relatives?
Yeah.
Like, that went into the Post Office profits, which is owned by the government, which is owned by the taxpayer. The taxpayer now will be paying your compensation. I mean, it's...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perversely, it finished up in my pocket and yours as taxpayers as a reduction in the losses or an increase in the profits of the Post Office.
Let me read this statement from the Post Office. We fully share the aims of the current public inquiry set up to establish what went wrong in the past and the accountability for it. We're acutely aware of the human cost of the scandal and are doing all we can to right the wrongs of the past as far as that is possible. Both Post Office and government are committed to providing full, fair and final compensation for the people affected. Fujitsu say in a statement, the current Post Office Horizon IT statutory inquiry is examining complex events stretching back over 20 years to understand who knew what, when and what they did with that knowledge. The inquiry has reinforced the devastating impact on postmasters' lives and that of their families, and Fujitsu has apologised for its role in their suffering. Is that enough?
No. Can it be? Anybody can apologise, anybody can say sorry, but, you know, if they don't mean it, if they don't do something positive, you know, to show that they acknowledge that they went wrong and what they did was wrong.
Especially when they're still trying to victimise some of the sub-postmasters, including me. You understand? Yes. That to me does not make me see them in the bright light that
so
they're trying to portray.
So you say there's a difference between the words, the rhetoric, and actually what's going on with some people.
Absolutely.
Let me, where are you? There. Let me introduce now Conservative peer, former MP Lord James Arbuthnot, who you will know if you've watched the drama has been campaigning on this issue for well over a decade, and many of his constituents will know that he's been campaigning after his constituent, postmistress Jo Hamilton, came to him for help in 2009. Here's a clip from the drama.
So now, if you redeclare everything, it'll balance, OK?
This is so helpful, thank you. Don't go away, stay with me till I've done it. Oh my God. It's just doubled right in front of my eyes. Now it says I'm £4,000 down.
And that literally happened. Lord Arbuthnot, thank you very much for talking to us this evening. I wonder if I can ask you, first of all, how would you describe the length of time it has taken to get to this point?
Absolutely terrible. We could have resolved this entire issue when Ron Warmington and Ian Henderson went in the first place, if the Post Office had not tried to cover everything up and to protect the brand at the expense of the Sub-Postmasters. So it's terrible.
Do you have any reservations about MPs overturning convictions handed out by the courts?
It's something that is, it makes one feel uncomfortable, but there is no other option here, because Sub-Postmasters, for entirely understandable reasons, were not coming forward to go through the tortuous process of having their convictions overturned. And we were only overturning about 10% of the convictions that had happened. And that was A, far too slow, and B, not likely to complete itself at all. And so the only option, really, is to do it by legislation. It does make one feel uncomfortable because there's meant to be the separation of powers in this country, so that the courts do one thing and the legislature do another. But there was no choice, I think, in this case, and it's a it's unprecedented.
But it does mean that in the future, theoretically, MPs could overturn other convictions that they didn't agree with, or indeed pass laws to find people who have been found innocent by the courts guilty.
Theoretically, it means that, but if MPs are minded to do that sometime in the future, I don't think they'll be that much affected by whether there's a precedent or not. I think they will just be behaving extremely badly. In this case, we are trying to behave as well as we can to the people who have suffered so much, the Sub-Postmasters. But there is that lack of comfort in this process. I acknowledge that, and the judges will acknowledge that, but we can't see a better solution.
Thank you very much for talking to our audience tonight and being with us alongside the former Sub-Postmasters. We appreciate your time. Thank you. We have very little time left. I'm going to ask you very briefly, what do you want to see happen now, Shazia?
From me, it's the 3 Fs. So full, fair, final, financial redress. That's what I want to see. Okay. And their apologies are most welcome, Victoria, but they do not pay the bills.
Briefly.
I totally agree with Shazia in what she said, and it's their apologies don't pay our bills. We still have to work extremely hard. We still have to take suffering from our community of what happened back then. We get questioned on it every day. I'm still in the same community. I'm still in the same post office. I get asked about it every day.
Val, really briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have to follow on both the things that they've said. Thank you.
Yes, I believe that I would like them to look into my case as well as the other 4 public interests and remove that labelling, because I think it's slandering and it's re-victimising us all over again.
Re-victimising you.
Yes.
Julie.
I know it's a cliche, but actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. Mr. Warmington?
Well, I'd like to just suggest that we don't forget the plight of the business people. All of these people were business people. They weren't employees. They invested huge amounts of money, hence the big losses. The people we've got to remember are the people that are now running the branches. The last thing we want is people to boycott the post office thinking they're punishing the people at the top when they're actually punishing the business people that are really are the face of the post office.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for giving us your reaction to the news today. Thank you for travelling from all over the place. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you've got a story to share, do email us, newsnight@bbc.co.uk. It is what we're here for. I'm back tomorrow. Good night.
Hello there. High pressure will continue to bring us fine and settled weather